Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We talked about it at length yesterday. The Loretta Lynch re-election press conference she had on Friday for Tiny Dancer, in which the DOJ issued a report that, not dissimilar from the Lori Lightfoot report produced by Tiny Dancer Star Chamber months earlier. They had to get this thing out, though, quickly, so they had to wrap it up real quick between November 8th and January 20th because they wanted to get this out and have this big PR splash before the change in administration and a new attorney general. And it essentially does what the previous report did. Completely excuse the civilian political class that has lorded over this city for the last half century and put the blame on Chicago police officers as part of a systemically racist institution that routinely violates the constitutional rights of Chicago residents, particularly minorities. That's what the report more or less said. Not a lot of data, a lot of anecdotes. And to the extent that data was cited, like only 2% of the 30,000 complaints resulted in disciplinary action. That was a data point that was cited over and over again. There was no real sociologically significant distillation of that statistic.
Well, they talked about foot pursuits, but they didn't give...
It's an anecdote.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You know, how many unlawful foot pursuits were there? And now what do they have to do in the future? Because the police officers I know are saying, well, now do I get out of my car? Do I chase them? Or am I supposed to stay in my car? We don't know what to do.
And so the interesting little wrinkle here, and this is not to say that there has not been police misconduct. Of course there has. Of course there have been bad police officers, present and past. Of course there has. That is a very different thing than to say an institution of 12,000 officers, nearly half of whom are minorities, is systemically racist and paint with that broad brush. Those are two very different ways to approach this difficult conversation and real issues that have plagued the department, the code of silence with respect to bad officers and so forth. But they talk about cover-ups with respect to bad officers. There's no mention about cover-ups with respect to bad politicians. There's no Gary McCarthy, the Rahm's police chief for most of his tenure. He's not interviewed by Department of Justice. What about Rahm Emanuel's role in covering up the Laquan McDonald tape? This was all initiated and began and ended with Gary McCarthy. Does anybody believe that? What about the political cover-up to protect Richard M. Daley's nephew, Richard Veneco, and that kid that he killed on Rush Street, and the cover-up of that to protect a political family?
Yeah, that didn't make the 164-page report.
So what about those matters? And here's the political play. Rahm is lauded by Loretta Lynch. Then he gets up there and he talks about training. And then Eddie Johnson, the police superintendent, gets up there and talks about training. So now Rahm has his campaign issue for 2019. Bad actors in the past. We're on the path to reform. This report is somehow going to help, and it's not. I think it's going to result in officers standing down even more than they did last year when we had a 20-year high incidence of violent crime. And but training, it's all training. We're going to buy a building. We're going to update the tapes. So my program for policing to try and middle the issue with respect to minority families I need. And those that are on the side of police officers, which is the majority of Chicago, which I also need, is to just talk training incessantly, like I'm on the side of the officers while I'm reforming this systemically racist organization. That's the political play that Rahm is making, and he had Loretta Lynch be an accomplice to that political play on Friday, in my view. But let's get Brian Warner's view. Brian Warner, friend of the show, chairman of the Chicago Police Survivors, joins us now. Brian, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Morning, guys. Thanks for having me back. First of all, let me talk one point to the report. I agree with you 100% that there was a small portion of people who took this as another mechanism to vilify the police, and it is an aha moment saying, we told you all this was going on, and to bash the police. I hope we can get past that, because I think there were some interesting things in the report, and obviously you admit it, and we'll admit that there are some bad police officers, and you do need to root them out, because they do diminish all the good work done by most police officers each and every day. But I'll tell you the most encouraging part of the report, and then I'll tell you the thing that scares the hell out of me the most. The most encouraging part that I found was the acknowledgement that the lack of resources for officers, something that the survivors group has been lobbying the administrations for the last 5 years, that we need more resources for health and well-being for officers. We are neglected or unrecognized victims in all this crime. We're the first ones who show up to the crime scene and offer comfort to those victims and try and render aid. Then other officers respond to try and preserve that crime scene. Then the detectives come and look through that crime scene and try and find clues. And then our evidence technicians come and have to photograph all this carnage. If you think that doesn't take a toll on the officers, you're sadly mistaken. And not to have the resources and the briefings and other things that they can help officers get through these things, which are sorely needed. If we can implement some of those things, then the report is accomplished something in my eyes. But with that said, the part that scares the hell out of me the most is the foot pursuits that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. It's one of the most important tools in law enforcement. If you pull up to a corner and 3 people run, chances are they probably have a gun, they have drugs, or they have a warrant that they haven't answered to, and they need to be taken off the street. Innocent people typically don't run. So if we put, and there's another tool that we use when we go into you start your tour of duty and you drive down the street and see the same 5 guys standing on a corner. There's open and notorious drug markets in the city that have been documented. So if you take away the ability to jump out of a car and try and catch that guy with the drugs or the gun, you think the 2-page report had a detrimental effect on policing in the city. Try and stop foot pursuits and then see how things play out for you.
So you think more officers are just going to stay in their cars?
It's not so much they're going to sit in the car. They're not going to know what the heck to do. If you have to second guess, do I have to wait till I see a gun? Do I have to wait till I see a bag of dope? Do I have to wait? If somebody's running, or if I've done surveillance, and I know that that's the guy with the gun, and I know that's the guy with the drugs, what's preventing me from chasing that person? And as you mentioned earlier, I want to see the science that says that every time we chase them, there's probably 100 foot pursuits every day in the city that end up in getting thugs and offenders off the street. You cannot take that tool away from the police officer. You'd be doing everybody a disservice. If I get out of a car and I second guessing myself and I can't chase that guy, now I'm standing there demoralized, and the guy's running down the street laughing, and all the people are standing there looking at me. What's that going to do for morale, and what's that going to do for the community? That's just going to embrace the thugs even more, like we've talked about.
Give us the net on this, because here's my concern. You know, I live over in Streeterville by Navy Pier, and there are cops all over there. They're deployed on Michigan Avenue. They're deployed by Navy Pier now, like they've never been before, because, of course, those are the tourist areas and the money areas. But my concern is that the people that live in these shooting galleries or neighborhoods that are kind of tweeners are going to see the quality of the policing that to which they're entitled decline because of reports like this that encourage officers to stand down because they don't know what to do, as you're describing. They don't know what they should do and when they should do it, or they don't feel like they're being backed up by the leadership of the police department, much less the leadership of the city. And so all these reports, this report will do, as shoddy as it was, in my opinion, is to actually worsen the quality of public safety and policing for the law-abiding in Chicago, particularly in the tougher neighborhoods.
That's quite true, and that may happen. That's why I'm hoping that the calmer heads prevail and the science will be researched before they implement any no-foot pursuit policy or any even modifications to it, that they do their due diligence and really look at the facts. It's confusing to us in law enforcement, and to me personally, that the police are the focus of this report. On average, and it didn't spike this year, on average, the police department's involved in 25 shootings, and of those 25 shootings in the last 20 years, it stays pretty steady. About 25 shootings, and we kill, unfortunately, about 8 people in those 25 shootings. If you look at the statistics, the citizens are doing it to one another on an average weekend, but yet the police department's the focus of the reports. I could see if our shootings increased and we were killing 800 people a year, or if our shootings spiked up so astronomically that there was an issue at hand, I could see us being the focus. we can all, I'm not trying to shun our responsibility. Of course, law enforcement has a role to play here, and my argument would be that we do our best, and we go out there each and every day, the only city agency out there 24/7, 365 days a year, trying to bring some normalcy and trying to help the good people held hostage in these communities. But we need the resources. The best analogy I can come up with is you have a leaky roof in your home. That leaky roof causes damage to your walls, and you continually fix the walls without addressing the roof problem. And that's what we're doing here. I lived in this city my whole life. I was a police officer almost 20 years, and I've seen different outside agencies and consultants come in and try and fix the police department. The real issue is trying to find out the reason. We know the reasons. There's a multitude of reasons for the epidemic of young black men shooting each other at a rate of 800 or 4,300 a year and killing each other at a rate of almost 800. It's our failure to put any resources in these communities economically. The unemployment rate is 52% in a lot of these communities. Our failed welfare system that gives a lot of the people in these communities the tools to survive, just the basics to survive, with a link card to put some food in your belly and a Section 8 voucher to put a roof over your head, but no tools or incentive to break that cycle of poverty. It's a big issue that needs to be addressed, and these are social ills. These are not police issues.
It's
very short-sighted for our politicians to stand there and say, okay, we're going to fix the police department, and all these things are going to go away. It's simply not true.
Yeah, that's just another example of the failure of the civilian political leadership, which so few want to confront for some unknown reason. But anyway, Brian Warner, always appreciate your insights. Brian Warner, chairman of the Chicago Police Survivors. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys, and keep law enforcement in your prayers. Thank you much.
Will do. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen.